The dynamic between Caitlin Clark and Stephanie White is very interesting because clearly it's a relationship with a basis of respect. I mean, when Stephanie White was hired, Clark was thrilled, super excited. And coach said all the right things about coming in and coaching the Fever and coaching Caitlin Clark. Then fairly early in the season, I would say there was a bit of a philosophical divide, but it never got to be completely worked out, right? And it wasn't as if they were at odds, but I noticed when they would talk about things, and for instance, when Caitlin Clark had come back from one of her injuries.
She said it live on national television. With a few sharp words, Caitlin Clark sent shockwaves through the league. While reflecting on her role after returning from injury, Clark acknowledged Stephanie White's coaching points. The need to set better screens, move off the ball, adapt to the system. But then, with a tone bordering on defiant, she reaffirmed her belief without hesitation. "I'm at my best with the ball in my hands." It wasn't just a simple statement. It was a direct, unmistakable challenge to her coach's vision for the team. The message cut through everything around it, a public counterpoint broadcast for all to hear, instantly creating a tension so palpable it felt like their entire dynamic could crack before it ever truly formed. The silence that followed made it even louder. A clear sign of a deep philosophical divide exposed for the world to witness.
And it wasn't as if they were at odds, but I noticed when they would talk about things, and for instance, when Caitlin Clark had come back from one of her injuries and Erin McDonald was there and they were asking about playing together, and Clark referenced some of the talking points Stephanie White has made, like being a better screener, about playing off ball, but then she, reiterated that she's at the best with the ball in her hands. And that reminded me of when I was there for the Liberty game, the first Liberty game that Clark got hurt and not the one that she came back and exploded in. And before that game, there was a little bit of a hint of,
The hiring of Stephanie White was initially met with overwhelming excitement, especially from Clark, who was reportedly ecstatic about the choice. White stepped in saying all the right things, expressing her commitment to the Fever and her eagerness to coach her rising superstar. But the honeymoon phase didn't last long. Early in the season, a noticeable philosophical divide began to show. There was a core disagreement over how the team, and Clark in particular, should function on the court. It wasn't an outright conflict, but an unresolved tension that lingered just beneath the surface, a fracture subtle enough to deny yet obvious enough for fans to sense. The mutual respect in the beginning was real, but the cracks formed almost immediately, signaling deeper issues waiting to unfold.
And then fans took that and turned it into Stephanie White will destroy Caitlin Clark and all that. We never got a chance to see them completely gel. When Clark had come back, even when she was playing hobbled before the groin injury that ultimately ended her season when the ankle injury compounded it, the Fever were rolling. They had won a couple of games in a row there, but not only just did they win them, they looked like a machine. And that was with Clark struggling to shoot because she was obviously hobbled with injuries. But then when the Fever go on and they win without Caitlin Clark, and clearly Stephanie White proves she's a hell of a coach, and the rest of the team steps up, Clark celebrates.
The first major public sign of the growing divide surfaced when Clark, still working her way back from injury, was asked about her role alongside teammate Erica Wheeler. She echoed White's talking points about needing to play off the ball more and becoming a better screener. But then the real Caitlin Clark emerged. She didn't hedge, didn't soften her stance. Instead, she doubled down, making it clear that she's at her best when she's the one orchestrating the offense, controlling the pace, making decisions with the ball in her hands. This wasn't a casual preference. It was a declaration of identity, a statement of who she is as a player at her core. And it stood in clear contrast to the system White was trying to install. It didn't feel like a simple adjustment. It felt like a subtle, unmistakable rejection, delivered on one of the most public stages possible.
Go on and they win without Caitlin Clark, and clearly Stephanie White proves she's a hell of a coach, and the rest of the team steps up. Clark celebrated in that moment. And I know for a fact that they have a good relationship, right? So it's just intriguing because they never got a chance to fully flesh out their on-court relationship. They have a great off-court relationship, and so much has been made of their relationship since without us having a chance to actually see the substance. And then when Stephanie White says anything, it gets run with, like when she had talked about how important Kelsey Mitchell was to the team. I don't even forget the
This public exchange mirrored an earlier, and in some ways more subtle, moment of friction that surfaced before a pivotal matchup against the Liberty. Once again, White emphasized the value of having Clark operate off the ball, presenting it as a way to ease her workload and improve the team's rhythm. Clark's response, though respectful, carried the same unmistakable hint of pushback. She acknowledged the theoretical benefits, brief rest, better spacing, helping teammates, but quickly redirected the conversation back to her core belief. She is at her most dominant when she's the one initiating the offense. When the ball is in her hands, she feels she can shape the game, control the tempo, and maximize her impact. What emerged wasn't merely a discussion about strategy. It was a collision between two fundamental basketball ideologies, a quiet but growing power struggle over who gets to define the team's identity.
see the substance. And then when Stephanie White says anything, it gets run with, like when she had talked about how important Kelsey Mitchell was to the team. I don't even forget the exact comments, but it was the most innocent comment ever, especially when they're trying to re-sign Kelsey Mitchell in free agency. But it's like, wow, she didn't say Caitlin Clark was the be-all, end-all of everything all the time, and therefore she, hates her. But regardless, Stephanie White was on with Sue Bird on her Bird's Eye View podcast and specifically talked about Caitlin Clark and said some things that I think fans will like to hear, especially coming from her.
How important was it to forge that relationship with her?
Fans and media quickly latched onto these subtle moments, magnifying them into a full-scale narrative of discord. The philosophical divide was sensationalized almost overnight, with headlines implying that Stephanie White was undermining Caitlin Clark's game or suppressing her natural brilliance. Public perception shifted rapidly, from a team working in harmony to one teetering under internal strain. Every remark, every slight change in body language was scrutinized to exhaustion, intensifying the pressure on both coach and player. And because neither side offered a definitive public clarification, the speculation only grew louder. What may have begun as minor strategic disagreements ballooned into what many perceived as a major power struggle, unfolding under the harsh, unrelenting glare of national attention.
Things that I think fans will like to hear, especially coming from her.
How important was it to forge that relationship with her for all the reasons?
I mean, really important. I'd had just a little bit of a relationship with Caitlin from calling her games a number of times, when she was in college. But it was very important. Look, she's obviously the centerpiece of everything that we do. And most importantly for me was just connecting and building trust. I don't know how she does what she does and handles it so gracefully. I'm not sure, myself as a.
At last, Stephanie White had her opportunity to confront the mounting rumors head-on during her appearance on Sue Bird's Bird's Eye View podcast. She didn't retreat or soften her stance. Instead, White delivered a calm but unmistakably firm reaffirmation of her coaching philosophy, her own moment of drawing a line in the sand. This wasn't a flare-up or a defensive outburst. It was a deliberate, confident assertion of how she believed the Fever needed to operate. She emphasized the necessity of building a real foundation with Clark, not just treating her as a superstar, but as a player who must be pushed, challenged, and shaped in order to reach her fullest potential. White's message was unmistakably strategic. In the middle of a media storm, she reclaimed control of the narrative, asserting her authority and her vision for the team. Her words laid out her coaching principles without apology, a clear declaration of the non-negotiables that would define her leadership moving forward.
But I'm going to be honest, and I think that I certainly appreciate that about her. And I'm also the same kind of psycho that she is in terms of competitiveness. Now it comes out in different ways, but we both just really want to win and we want to set ourselves and our teammates up for success. And so it was really important for me, right away with her.
So a few important things I think that were said there. Number one was she's the centerpiece of everything that we do. So that will be received really well out there amongst CCFC. And it's right? Everybody knows that, both on the basketball court and from the business